Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, First Pioneer PTQ is in the books, just in time for them to throw the book at some of these cards.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably pretty informative, given that they decided on the ban list after lunch, processing the results of the PTQ, where they banned 3 cards from the top 2 decks. You know, it's interesting. They've made clear they're going to be a little aggressive. I mean, if you'll recall, it took Modern a few years to get into a good place. And it sounds like instead of just waiting every 3 months, they want to do this every week until the list gets into a good place.
So if something's on the banned list, is there expectation that it's going to stay on the banned list? Like they're not going to decide that they like Oath of Nissa next week?
Yep. That is the expectation. It's theoretically possible for them to change, but I would guess that it is way more likely that cards will get added with no cards subtracted.
I was pretty excited about the results of this PTQ, actually. I thought there was some pretty interesting stuff going on. I mean, maybe a little bit more representation from Felidar Guardian and company than I would have liked at Format Equilibrium, but there was a ton of different decks, different combo decks, and not fair decks maybe, but recognizable creature decks still performing.
Yeah, part of the problem is that right now some of the busted decks are auto-oppressive, or have been so far. So like the band of how many normal decks you can play is actually pretty tight. Like Felidar Guardian definitely was one of the most constraining aspects of the format, where you're talking about a format where there just aren't very many great removal options or counterspell options. And at the same time, if somebody just assembles these 2 cards, that there are so many ways to tutor up. If somebody assembles these 2 cards, they win. And it's just not surprising at all to be on the first ban list. The PTQ had 2 copies of Copycat in the top 8. And the most recent Pioneer Challenge online, which was, demonstrating some of the pretty important decks of the format, had Felidar Guardian in the finals. So definitely some really strong performances from it. And they've all kind of collapsed around green because, with Oath of Nissa for selection, Gilded Goose and Land Royale for speed, and Oko Thief of Crowns because this is a deck.
So if we start with Baron von Fonz's third place deck from the PTQ, like you said, this deck's including Oko Thief of Crowns, who is stealing spots in decks and formats all across the formats. But this deck's got Gilded Goose to, I guess, get Rogue Refiner and or Saheeli Rai out quickly. This deck is like a greatest hits, right? It's got Attune with Aether and Rogue Refiner for energy, but it's not an energy deck. I guess it's got Harnessed Lightning, but that's kind of really a sub-theme, even though it comes from the same block as Saheeli Rai. And then, the real hit here is, Saheeli and Felidar Guardian putting their powers together to make infinite power.
Yeah, I mean, once you combo, that's where it's at. But what do you think of the use of the energy sub-theme here?
I think I'm not sure, because this deck's also got Oath of Chandra. I think the Oath of Chandra element with all of these planeswalkers is really attractive. So to have Oath of Chandra and Harness Lightning next to each other, I guess that what Baron von Fonz is doing here is just trying to get enough energy to hit maybe bigger creatures. For example, Oath of Chandra is both slow because it's an enchantment and only does 3, but Harness Lightning can deal 4 or more, which would allow Baron von Fonz to, for example, kill somebody else's Felidar Guardian at instant speed. That's something that they might want to do instead of getting killed.
Do you think there's just no profit in Traverse the Ulvenwald? Or is it really just you got to be able to kill other people's Felidar Guardians?
Well, it's an interesting question. So Traverse the Ulvenwald, I often think of is in contrast to Oath of Nissa, which obviously is a card that is banned now, but was played in this deck. I think that this deck doesn't get a lot out of Traverse the Uvenwald compared to Attune with Aether.
You go get Felidar Guardian.
Yeah, you get Felidar Guardian after you have to do a lot of setup to get there, and I think that while this deck has a lot of different kinds of cards, they're not the kinds of cards that go into the graveyard very much, right? Like, most of these are permanents. Outside of Attune with Aether and Harness Lightning, everything else is a permanent. You're not going to set up Traverse the Uvenwald that well. There's no, like, self-mill or, like, any kind of careful study type action to set it up. You're just casting stuff and usually putting it into play.
Well, I mean, Tamio sets it up pretty well, obviously, but then you've got lots of good types. Like Heart of the Kirin goes to the void sometimes, or goes to the graveyard, or else you're going to be putting a beat down on them. And then obviously these Planeswalkers, and with Harness Lightning over at Instance, and Traverse or Attune for sorcery, and Oath of Nissa or Oath of Chandra. Like, if you Legend Rule the Oath, you got an enchantment. I don't know. It's just something to think about that I think is a little bit more relevant with Oath of Nissa gone, but a little bit less relevant with Felidar Guardian gone.
Yeah, so I think, like, there's really two speeds to how this deck works. One of them is, you can super Jimmy Jam and kill somebody real quick. Like, maybe not this deck, but the decks that are more elf leaning can win on the third turn. But a lot of the time, this deck actually has to do everything in one turn in order to not expose half of the combo to the opponent's removal, right?
Or it did. But that's part of actually, see, to me, it seems like, it's another Felidar Guardian Saheeli Rai combo. But what now? With Felidar Guardian banned, what's the part that we can take away and use with this going forward? I mean, are we going to, should we be actually just looking at Teamer Walkers? Because, or is the white part just crucial because it's Teferi, right? Because maybe the red is supposed to be gone and we're supposed to just be talking about Bant Walkers.
I was actually thinking that you could keep the energy Heart of Kirin part of this deck and then just switch it up to maybe Aetherworks Marvel. What if you play with Emery? That card seems like it would fit right in. If you switch.
So are you talking about keeping white or cutting it?
I would keep white because I think Teferi is really important if you're going to try to set up a combo.
Then why keep red?
I like keeping red because I guess you don't need Harness Lightning anymore if you don't have to kill 4s. Yeah.
It's harder to cast your Planeswalkers too if you don't have Oath of Nissa.
That's true. But I think, if we go down by a color, it's probably pretty easy to get to the colors we need, right?
Well, definitely. That's why I want to cut a color.
I'm cutting red. I'm down for cutting red, and I think that Bant Walkers / Marvel is where I'd start.
Interesting.
You don't like Marvel with Emery? Emery seems like a sweet one to me.
I don't know. That's a different deck. I mean, that's a thing you could do, but it kind of takes you down a different path. I kind of imagine the synergy-driven stuff goes such a different direction versus just playing with really good cards. And I kind of imagine if you just play with 4 Gilded Goose, 4 Oko, 4 Teferi, maybe some Supreme Verdict. I don't know. I mean, instead of, I guess you go a different way. Gilded Goose into Supreme Verdict type stuff is not that good. Any kind of whatever kind of white sweeper you want to play. Yeah.
You could certainly go Gilded Goose into a variety of Planeswalkers. Early on we were seeing that Sultai Walkers deck. That's certainly not solved. I think that if you were going to go into a 3-color or even 4-color Planeswalker deck, I would be biased towards wanting to play black versus some of the other support colors, just because the disruption is so bad. I think Thoughtseize is maybe the best way to go, especially if one of the default ways that people are going to be abusing their Gilded Gooses by playing fast Teferis.
Well, I mean, but what would you think of just playing a Bant Walker deck that uses Nexus of Fate and Dig Through Time?
I mean, I I don't think I would want to Walkers it as much as I would want to Wilderness Reclamation it. Is that like kind of part of your imagination?
Yeah. I mean, maybe you don't need the Walkers, but like, if you play, 4 Nexus of Fate, 4 Op, 4 Supreme Will, 4 Growth Spiral, 4 Dig Through Time, 4 Wilderness Reclamation, and then like some amount of Narset or Tameo or Search for Azcanta action, and maybe Fogs for defense or something.
Well,
like that seems like a pretty good way to do it, right?
So Trolling Saruman actually won the PTQ with Search for Azcanta, Wilderness Reclamation, Nexus of Fate deck, and just from my eyeball, I don't think a single card in this deck has been banned. Trolling Saruman must have navigated through multiple Felidar Guardian combo decks and the Mono Green Devotion deck in the finals.
Well, yeah, because I mean, part of that is that the PTQ results weren't actually as important for the bannings as the Pioneer Challenge.
Yep.
Like, I think the Pioneer Challenge really conveys what's going on with this format. That's so, at the very least, what they were focusing on pulling back on out the gate. This Simic Nexus deck looks pretty good. I do wonder how much, because this is the same deck that finished 9th in the Pioneer Challenge. What I do wonder is why this instead of anything else? Is it just because Dig Through Time is that good?
That's a complicated question to answer. Part of it is I just lean back on what you often say to me when I'm speculating is this deck is still legal, right? So because I don't think the PTQ was as important for the ban list as the challenge, but I think it's funny. This deck isn't particularly broken, right? This deck is barely up.
It's pretty broken. I mean, Wilderness Reclamation with Dig Through Time and Nexus of Fate is like.
It's not that it's not upgraded, but it's barely upgraded from the standard version. When you compare it to the other decks that have gotten upgrades relative to their standard predecessors. This deck gets Dig Through Time, great. That's a super good card. It arguably gets Supreme Will, which is, both an impulse and a permission.
Well, it definitely does. I think Supreme Will is pretty good in this deck.
Yeah, but other than that, this is pretty close to the standard deck, right? But versus some of the other decks are just wildly upgraded. I wouldn't mind this deck continuing to be legal. It's only okay at defending itself. And
its win rate was not good. That's part of the reason why there was no action taken on it.
Yeah, I think
obviously, when you got the trophy, can't tell you nothing. But
I mean, the trophy's pretty. In a case like this, the trophy is very, very important. This is an all or nothing.
Yeah,
it's funny. Fog is actually an interesting card. Fog is really spectacular in a format where the opponent is trying to kill you by creature damage, even if it's infinite creature damage, right?
Yeah, but without people playing Felidar Guardian anymore, I think Fog is going to lose some of its luster.
Yeah, well, that's just going to become probably more, make the combo more consistent cards rather than defend the combo cards.
What do you think of Display of Dominance? Display of Dominance as one of the tools. It's kind of these Simic Nexus decks are playing it pretty frequently as a sideboard option. Destroy target blue or black non-creature permanent. And it also has the whole permanents you control can't be the target of blue or black spells your opponents control this turn. But the reason you're playing it is to destroy target blue or black non-creature permanent. Because the question, you see, it takes away from your Veil of Summer action. And here we see 3 Veil of Summers, but there could have been a 4th. So is it definitely right to play Display of Dominance or Negate or Mystical Dispute over that 4th Veil of Summer?
Well, they do such different things, even though they theoretically are hating the same colors. Display of Dominance, among other things, can destroy an Oko or, in particular, a Teferi that's already in play. Because Teferi in play is poison for this deck's ability to execute its combo. So Teferi is a blue permanent, and Display of Dominance can destroy it. If Teferi resolves, this deck's in trouble. Its permission is not particularly good in Teferi, especially in decks with Gilded Goose or Land War Elves, etc. Can come out faster than this deck could potentially defend against it with cards like Supreme Will. So I think that Display of Dominance has like a unique and important role in the sideboard, assuming people continue to play Teferis.
It's pretty, I don't know, it just seems so bad to play this deck in a format with Teferi anyway. Doesn't Teferi just own you?
I mean, if Teferi resolves, like, your combo doesn't really work. Like, that's...
What aspect of your deck works?
I mean, you can still do the stuff, and if you have, like, a flipped Search for his Kanta, you can do selections and stuff like that. It's just, you have to literally, like, main phase your Nexus of Fate, right? Like, I don't know, you could still get there. Like, if they have no defense, they just have a Teferi. It's just annoying.
Okay.
I mean, Cyclonic Rift and stuff like that. I don't know. It's obviously not good. But, it's not terminal. If the opponent doesn't have, like, permission to back it up or they don't kill you, I think, like, your deck it's still a functional deck. It's just not a very, smoothly functional deck, I'd say.
So, half the field was Felidar Guardian decks or Green Devotion. And while Green Devotion in the PTQ, Green Devotion looks like it was only about half the representation of Felidar Guardian. In the Pioneer Challenge, the Green Devotion dwarfed anything else and was just all over the place. A great example of this is Todd Anderson's second place list, Strong Sad. Todd Anderson's second place list from the PTQ. And this is a deck built around you on the first turn, you reveal Leyline of Abundance, and maybe you use Once Upon a Time to help set up, maybe you don't, but you play a turn 1 Elvish Mystic or Llanowar Elf. You got 8 of those. And then on turn 2, you're really cooking. Like, if you can tap the Llanowar Elf for green because of the Leyline of Abundance, play a Burning Tree Emissary, which breaks even on mana but adds to your devotion. And then even if let's say you just had the 1, then you're at a spot where your Nykthos is like super duper built up now. And you can just drop Nissa, who shakes the world, or Voracious Hydra, or whatever.
Yeah, there's already 5 green pips, right? 2 from Burning Tree Emissary, 2 from Leyline of Abundance, and then 1 from the Elf. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you've got 2 mana floating from the Burning Tree Emissary, so you can just use the Nykthos immediately and just play Nissa on the second turn.
Yep, absolutely.
And obviously Oath of Nissa was contributing to the Green Devotion also. This, to me, is pretty obviously first of all, obviously this is what got Leyline of Abundance banned. But, like, I think that Oath of Nissa, even though it was, like, just a very, very prevalent piece of Oko decks and everything like that, this is a deck that really abused it because of how much the Green Devotion really matters, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
and you just go find more Nykthoses.
Yeah, so Oath of Nissa is great in this deck. Obviously, you can get key cards like Nykthos trying to Nyx, but one of the things that's kind of like, secretly fantastic about it is it can help you early for your consistency, but like mid and late game, it can get you one of your bomb creatures to win the game also, which is pretty cool. I really like the banning of Leyline of Abundance here. Obviously, Leyline of Abundance is not like a mean-spirited or objectively overpowered card in the abstract, but I think they want Nykthos to be a good card that people play, and Nykthos is just too good when you have... It's really just not only free 2 mana from Nykthos, it's like free 4 mana. Like, if you have an elf, that other card that they want to be good, I think, becomes abusive.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, lands that produce more than 1 mana have a long and storied history. My guess is that there's a decent chance this is going to be like every other format where there's this part of the ban list where you're like, what? Like, Lodestone Golem is restricted in Vintage? Why? Well, Lodestone Golem, like Trinisphere, Chalice of the Void, Throne of Amethyst, they're all restricted so that Mishra's Workshop doesn't have to be restricted. And we see this with Urzalands, we see this with Ancient Tomb. Basically, every format has some number of cards that are banned or restricted so that some land can produce more mana. And in this case, I think Leyline of Abundance is the first to go, but it may not be the last.
This deck is still going to be viable, I think, despite the banning of 2 of its key cards. The rest of the engine is so robust. And it can just lean a different direction, right? Like, if you look at the difference between Strong Sad's deck, which finished second in the PTQ, and Taco Farmer's deck, which finished first in the Pioneer Challenge, like, the main swap is just moving 2 Courser of Perfects to 2 Jadelight Ranger, right? It's, like, not a profound change in the main deck at all. So,
well, yeah, but there's actually more than just Green Devotion for Nykthos decks. Did you see this mono black deck? Like in the Pioneer Challenge, Clyde the Glide Drexler finished third with a black Devotion deck that really warrants a little bit of attention, I think. So, your only 1-drops are the Knight of the Ebon Legion. Presumably, Thoughtseize and Fatal Push are eating up a lot of that equity. But at 2 drops, outside of the Walking Ballistas that all these decks have as an occasional feature as a way to sink all that Nykthos mana, there's Stromkirk Condemned and Gifted Aetherborn. Gifted Aetherborn, I know you've been a champion of that card since it's first being printed. Stromkirk Condemned is an interesting second option.
So
there's a few vampires in this deck between obviously Knight of the Ebon Legion being a vampire, but the deck also has Kalidas and the Gifted Aetherborn and Drana and Champion of Dusk. And so all that fits together as part of a Sorin deck, actually.
Yeah, so basically every creature in this deck other than Grey Merchant of Asphodel and Walking Ballista is a vampire, right? I mean, the main deck creatures, right? Like, obviously, Blight Beetle is not a vampire, but most of the main deck creatures are vampires, so they're all getting...
Yeah, and then there's even Mutavolts, too.
Yeah, oh, that's true. So they're all getting buffed by Stromkirk Condemned. So Stromkirk Condemned is like a 2/2 for BB with the text discard a card. Vampires you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, and he himself is a vampire. So it's like
which you can only use once per turn.
Yeah, but it's like Team Wild Mongrel, right? That's kind of powerful. But there's no way to like exploit it the way that you would Wild Mongrel. I don't think you're just getting buffs, right? Although it depends. If you have a ton of vampires in play, the conversion of a single card to X number of creatures is probably pretty good.
Well, one of the best synergies for Stromkirk Condemned is actually the use of 4 castle locked lanes. So the castle lets you draw a card and then lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. And so when you can dump your hand out, partly because of just curving out, partly because Nykthos is giving you a boost of mana, but partly because you're just discarding a card to Stromkirk Condemned every turn. When you can empty your hand that way, it makes it plus Sorin Imperious Bloodlord lets you play a vampire from your hand on the cheap.
Just for free, yeah.
And being able to play your hand out really fast and get low makes the Castle Locked Veins a much more reliable source of card advantage without it being too brutal to your life total, which you can then use to fuel Stromkirk Condemned if you so choose.
Yeah, this deck is sweet. I'm glad you pointed it out.
It also lets you use Fatal Push, which has some matchups where the card would be dead.
You mean just getting rid of it?
Being able to put it to use.
Yeah.
And then also, when you Champion of Dusk, you're going to draw so many cards sometimes that you just can't play all the lands you draw. And Stromkirk Condemned is a great way to put those extra lands to use.
I feel like I want more Stromkirk Condemned. Like, Clyde the Glide Drexler.
It looks kind of interesting, right?
It seems awesome in this deck.
Yeah, one of the things that concerns me about this deck is that, as currently configured, is that it's only got 8 2-cost plays, which seems a little light under the circumstances. And then at the 3 spot, having 4 Sorin Imperious Bloodlord and 2 Drana, followed by I mean, the big thing here is it's so hard for me to wrap my head all the way around 4 Grey Merchant of Asphodels and 4 Champion of Dusks. And I get that Sorin makes Champion of Dusk not always play like a 5, but this is so many 5s, right?
Yeah, my mental objection to this deck is like, it seems pretty choppy in turns 1, 2, and 3. Assuming you hit your like first 4 land drops, like you're probably doing better stuff on turn 4 and 5, assuming your opponent hasn't already killed you, and you will for the rest of the game. But, you know, just navigating those first few turns is less about having something to do, although that is a thing, right? Like there's not that many 1-mana plays in this deck, but like having a thing to do that's relevant, right? Like you really want to Thoughtseize against one of the combo decks, right? And you want a Fatal Push against one of the creature decks, but you don't want to have Thoughtseize against the creature deck or Fatal Push against the combo deck necessarily. And you know your opportunity cost on your mana is so enormous in a format like this, where people are able to play anything from like Llanowar Elf to Bomat Courier, Monastery Swiftspear, you know, these Gilded Goose, just really, really high leverage turn 1 plays.
What do you think of Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, the interaction with Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth and Castle Locked Vein? I guess it doesn't matter, because Castle Locked Vein only needs 1 swamp. But I wonder about the ones that need 3 swamps.
It does help with Nykthos and Mutavault, though.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I just think that that's a really, really good synergy. But I guess this deck doesn't have a lot of things that's damaging itself. But the thing that I think would be funny is...
Yeah, it does, dude. 4 Thoughtseize and 4 Champion of Dusk and the 4 Castle Locked Vein.
I was just like in this mental space of, you know, some of the red decks that are relatively land light and just like a ton of their lands damage them, even though they're only in 1 color or, you know, barely in white. This deck doesn't really have that problem, other than, I guess, like from its spells, right? Like Thoughtseizing hurts yourself. But I was just thinking about decks that are, you know, really, really damaging themselves on mana, and this deck isn't really there. Its bigger downside is that it might be in a situation early where Nykthos isn't on, but Urborg turns Nykthos on turn 2, so no big deal.
Well, not straight up.
I mean, it makes it so you could just tap it for a Gifted Aether.
I see. Like, I see. Yeah. Knight of the Ebon Legion, man. This deck has so much life lost to itself from like Champion of Dusk or Thoughtseize. It's kind of sweet to be able to Knight of the Ebon Legion and so consistently make it a 3/4 or whatever.
Yeah, that guy is sweet. I think it's amazing. Like M20 has just got cards, you know, coming out of the woodwork, and this one's just already you know, blazing a trail in Pioneer at the 1.
Yeah, I mean, oh, actually, here I wanted to mention, by the way, dude, is there any hope of Grey Merchant powering up our Lich's Mastery deck?
When you say our Lich's Mastery deck, there are a lot of words laced together there that I might not be 100% tuned in on. I would say that Clyde the Glide Drexler kind of got the flavor of, let's call it, our Lich's Mastery deck by adding that 1 Bolas's Citadel to the sideboard. That's in the same neighborhood, I think, as our Lich's Mastery deck.
I'm talking a little bit more Lich's Mastery oriented.
I know.
You know, like,
I know you are. I'm just saying they're in the same neighborhood.
I want to be like, for reals, like dedicated Lich's Mastery, man. But I don't know. Maybe that's just, you know, not a realistic way to do it.
I'm about 52 cards off of where you are right now. How many colors is this Lich's Mastery deck? Are we like, for example, a red-white deck?
I don't know.
Lich's Mastery?
1 or 2. No. Nope. I'm thinking
No infinite
somewhere
turns.
between mono black and black white.
Yeah, just add one more color, you get infinite turns, Patrick.
Infinite turns.
Yeah, remember Ali Antrazi's deck, which has it was the Lich's Mastery deck that also has the you die but you Final Fortune, that card. They were all buddies.
Why do I need infinite turns? I have Lich's Mastery, man.
I know it's powerful.
All right, dude. So actually, on the note of Bolas's Citadel and Lich's Mastery, are either one of those even as good as the Command the Dreadhorde? Command the Dreadhorde to me looks like one of those cards that could actually just quietly be have a way new context in Pioneer that never existed in any other format.
See, I feel that card is the kind of card that might be good, but it's also the kind of card that might be spectacular only on certain weekends. When it was really good in Standard, there were pretty defined battle lines, right? It wasn't unbeatable in the abstract. It was good because people had certain kinds of cards in their own decks that were getting destroyed, and they were anticipating people having certain kinds of permanents, and that they were lining up to command back up. I think that as long as the format is as diverse as it is, that card is it's inconsistent in its ability to generate returns.
I'm talking about you win the game because you just pull together stuff that's winning. Because Standard never really had Command the Dreadhorde legal with a bunch of cheap graveyard stocking cards, right? Like Satyr Wayfinder, for instance.
Oh, you're saying we're Command the Dreadhorde combo, right?
Yeah.
You're using Satyr Wayfinder.
Yeah. Combo. We're playing like a combo.
And then
they die.
You what planeswalkers do you want? Bolus, right? You got a Bolus.
Could be. I don't know. Bolas is a good one. Oko's pretty good.
See,
Teferi's pretty good.
I feel like Oko, I mean, I know this sounds heretical, but if we're on the 6 casting costs and Bolus kind of the text of my card says win the game, I mean, Oko is low power when you're talking about these planeswalkers now.
Maybe. I kind of want to just create a winning position. Where maybe, I don't know, man. Oko just seems so good.
Yeah, he's really good. But he's good compared to other people playing Magic. He's not good compared to cards that just say I win the game. He's pretty fair. He's a really good fair guy. He's so fair. He's so good at being fair. He's not really fair. But once you get to the actual unfair part of the metagame, Oko no longer shines, in my opinion.
Is there any? I mean, maybe this Command the Dreadhorde stuff is just a bad Kethis the Hidden Hand deck. Didn't one of these top 8 the PTQ?
Yep. So the PTQ, there was a Kethis deck that was actually defeated by Todd Anderson in either the top 8 or the top 4, and it was very similar to the Kethis deck from Standard. Obviously, just upgraded with regards to some of its card availability. Vorg 7 finished in 4th place with a Kethis deck that it's got Oko, which is a card that it didn't have in Standard, but the rest of the deck is pretty similar. Emery is a new addition, which I guess helps stock the graveyard.
What a Hope of Gurapur! Isn't Hope of Gurapur? It's amazing in this deck. So first of all, it's historic. It's a legendary artifact, right? It's historic for your Diligent Excavator. It's a legend for Kethis. It's an artifact for Emery, and then when it hits them, you can sack it to lock them out of spells for the turn.
So this is a good time buyer, you're saying, among other things. It gets time because of its interaction with Emery, and it steals time from them.
It locks them out completely when you go off.
Yeah. I think this deck is probably still pretty solid. Loss of Oath of Nissa doesn't seem critical to me relative to some of the other stuff. Here, I think, is a deck, Patrick, where Traverse the Uvenwald might be having some additional text, right? Like you've got artifacts, you've got planeswalkers, instants,
creatures.
It itself is a sorcery. You'd have to mix up the mana, right? This set doesn't have any basics, so you might want. There's no fetches, so I guess that's not something that you can cheat with. But I think that it might be a decent long game replacement for Oath of Nissa, especially since this deck is. It's not that it's reliant on any particular creature other than Kethis the Hidden Hand, but like it's nice to have a lot of these creatures in certain spots.
I mean, could you be into? Is there any way to blend this with Jeskai Ascendancy, or is that just too ambitious?
I'm thinking about it. Like, I feel like if you're doing Jeskai Ascendancy, like the natural way to do it is just to go like Emry with 0 casting costs. Stuff like Mox Amber. I'm not even sure if
you have Mox Amber already.
Yeah, I'm just like I don't even know if you're getting anything by blending Jeskai Ascendancy with this deck. Like, I think if you're going to go that direction, you might just eschew the black and green elements and just go for a more consistent, Jeskai deck. Because like, what are you getting, right? Like, Kethis isn't any advantage if you have the Jeskai Ascendancy part. It's actually harder to defend Kethis than it is to defend an enchantment.
Man. Is there any way we can take advantage of Kethis being an elf? It's kind of wild, right? But there's probably just not a lot of elf. Yeah, I don't know. I just think about
every part of the buffalo.
Dude, I want to make use of all of it, man. If we let's say that we end up in this world where we're using Jeskai Ascendancy with Emry.
Actually, Patrick, yes. What if you use like elf synergies? Like, is the Guiltleaf Palace legal? No, is that
no?
It's not legal. All right, never mind. I was like, oh, you could get your land to come into play untapped, but no, that's not a legal card. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's all good. If we're gonna play Jeskai Ascendancy and Emry, what about playing Saheeli Rai?
Talk to me about how this works.
So they banned Felidar Guardian, but they didn't ban Saheeli Rai.
Yep.
So you could Saheeli Rai and do it a little bit dirtier. Like if you play with Altar of the Brood, which is that 1-cost artifact that makes it so that whenever a permanent goes to whenever a permanent goes to your graveyard from the battlefield, you mill your opponent for 1. And that's a 1-cost artifact. And then there's another artifact for 2, Liquid Metal Coating.
Yeah.
You can tap Liquid Metal Coating to make something an artifact until end of turn. So if you were to go turn 1, Alter the Brood, turn 2, Liquid Metal Coating, turn 3, Saheeli Rai, you can use your Liquid Metal Coating to you just tap it and you make Saheeli Rai into an artifact.
Yep.
Saheeli Rai can then use its -, ability on itself to make a copy because it would now be an artifact, and then your new Saheeli Rai would have the property of also being an artifact. You Planeswalker Uniqueness rule the original Saheeli away, and with your new Saheeli, you would resolve the 1-point mill from Altered Brood, that trigger. Mill your opponent for 1, and then you have a Saheeli Rai in play. That's an artifact. So you would just do this again. You just make as many copies of Saheeli Rai as you want over and over and over again, and you mill your opponent for 60. Alternatively, if you don't draw Alter the Brood, you could play Fireweaver. There's like this 2-drop creature, Reckless Fireweaver. Reckless Fireweaver is 1 in a red for a 1/3 that whenever an artifact goes to your graveyard from the battlefield, or whenever you play an artifact, you do 1 damage to your opponent. So like you can just play an unlimited number of artifacts because every copy of Saheeli Rai is another artifact, and it's when it enters the battlefield, not when you cast it. So Reckless Fireweaver or Alter the Brood wins the game if you have if you have Liquid Metal Coating and Saheeli Rai.
Maybe there's is there a way to play this kind of a strategy maybe with Karn? So you could make a Karn deck that
Absolutely. I think that's the way you would want to do it.
you go get liquid, you have at least one liquid metal coating in your sideboard, and then you have like a fair side of your deck. Is there a way to do it with like
Yeah.
Karn goes and gets liquid metal coating to set people up, and then you have like
Or Altar of the Brood. You can also go get Altar of the Brood, too.
sure, but I was thinking like if you don't have the other combo pieces, right? Like let's say you don't have the Saheeli Rai, which is necessary to winning this way.
Yeah.
You could just use Karn to set up liquid metal coating, and then like your deck is full of artifact destruction or something. Like what?
Well, a Braid is an easy one.
Yeah, sure.
A Braid is just, that's just a good card anyway that becomes amazing if you have liquid metal coating.
So you could have like
And you can put Anger the Gods.
three liquid metal coatings in your main deck or something, one in your sideboard. I don't know how many Altar of the Brood I'd want to play. Maybe one in my main deck and one in my sideboard, and maybe have search cards that can get a 1-mana artifact, although I'm not sure which ones I'd want yet. Maybe it's right to play 3 in my main deck, but that feels horrible to me.
I don't know. It depends on how dedicated you are to the combo.
I mean, in my imagination, half of my deck is just like a Karn artifact removal spell deck right now, but that might be wrong. A Braid sounds great, but there needs to be other stuff.
Here's some Karn options for you. You can go get Torrential Gearhulk, if that's your thing.
Yeah, I'm in colors.
You can get Walking Ballista, Perilous Vault, Sorcerer's Spyglass, Grafdigger's Cage, or Tormod's Crypt. Any of these do anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to want to have some stuff that disrupts other people's combos, right? So some sort of anti-graveyard card for the Kethis combo deck. I think Walking Ballista is a no-brainer. I think Sorcerer's Spyglass is a no-brainer. What disrupts Wilderness Reclamation decks? Anything?
Sorcerer's Spyglass isn't very reliable against them.
No, I mean, what do you name, like a Flip Descanta? Like that doesn't really bother them that much.
No, have to think about it. But yeah, I think that seems promising. Plus, I'm gonna laugh if Saheeli Rai ends up being the best like Saheeli Rai combo, even with Felidar Guardian banned.
That would be awesome. Actually, I really wouldn't mind, turning their Wilderness Reclamation into an artifact and then tinging it with my Abrade.
Oh yeah.
There's probably other stuff that we could play that's equally good to Abrade, or maybe like generating some extra card advantage or some flexibility. Also, God forbid people just play artifacts, right? Like, we can just get them.
Sure. What do you think of the Oath of Nissa being banned, being just like, what's the next green draw smoothing card in line, right? Like, Once Upon a Time, Traverse the Ulven Wild, and Attune with Aether have all got to be on notice, right?
I mean, Attune with Aether was banned in Standard, right?
Yeah.
I mean...
And Traverse was always in the discussion.
I think... I'm skeptical that Traverse gets banned, ever, in this format. It's good, don't get me wrong. It's clearly good, but it requires you to do a little work, and I think it's a very interesting card. Right? Like some of the other cards, one of the reasons that Attune with Aether is such an easy ban and Traverse is a difficult ban, at least in my imagination, is Traverse requires work and is interesting, and Attune makes you have to do less work and is not interesting. Or just like, oh, here's the same card as this, but we're just going to give all the abilities to you for free, right? Like, you always get the energy, and you could use the energy to do stuff also for free, and you don't even have to think about it. We'll tell you which cards you can do for free. Right? That's one of them. The other one is like, hey, are you going to play cycling enchantments? Or what are your mix of creatures going to be? How many lands are you going to play that are going to go to the graveyard? Because you need to do a certain amount of setup. Are you going to do big creatures or little creatures?
Wait, so do you really think that Attune with Aether is more likely to get banned than Once Upon a Time?
I was comparing Attune with Aether with Traverse the Ulvenwald, not with Once Upon a Time. I think Once Upon a Time is a crazily powerful Magic card. I think it's like the best card in Standard by a mile. And
you think it's the best card in Standard?
By a mile.
You think Once Upon a Time is better than Oko?
Yes, I think that one of the reasons Oko is so
you're
good
crazy.
is because Once Upon a Time is so good.
You're crazy. I don't think Once Upon a Time is in the same ballpark as Oko.
I don't know. I think Oko's real good. I think Once Upon a Time is almost always a 4 of next to Oko.
Yeah, but like, what would be more impactful to the format? Banning Once Upon a Time or banning Oko?
Um, I'd have to think about that. Like
I don't think it's close.
there's
I don't
really
think
good
it's
decks
even
that.
remotely close.
I mean, the Mythic Championship V was won by a deck with 4 Once Upon a Time and 0 Oko.
Who plays that red green deck anymore, though?
I'm Patrick. Don't get me wrong. I'm on Team Oko. Oko, I think, is an A plus. I'm just saying, Once
You're
Upon
not
a
on
Time.
Team Oko if you would pick Once Upon a Time over it.
I mean, I was on Team Preordain, right? Like, we had the same discussion back in the day. You were on Team
I
Chase.
know.
I was on Team Preordain.
Dude, I don't know, man. I'm not saying that what's right to ban or not. Sometimes you ban preordained, sometimes you ban the Jace. But I'm just saying that from like, if you were to take a card out of the format, there's a card that right now, because it's legal, has like 6 different color hosers all getting played main deck. Like, dude, I mean, the whole format is like revolves around people splashing a color hoser because it can hit Oko.
Yeah. Some of the Simic decks just play Aether Gust main deck when they used to play Disdainful Stroke.
Yeah, but like Once Upon a Time doesn't have that kind of an effect. If you were to just ban Once Upon a Time, how much would even change in the format, man?
I think that the archetypes being played would not change that much.
No.
But I think the win rates of the archetypes would change a lot. I think that
I don't know.
one of the reasons that most of these Oko decks are winning so much is because they're able to land such a good turn 2 or at worst an insane turn 3. That's a result of Once Upon a Time. Obviously the way that they're winning is by hitting the Oko. But like the fact that you can just like look at your opening hand and you're just like, all right, I'm just going to goose into Oko here, even though the rest of my hand stinks and it's just going to develop by itself. That's not normal. That's not how any other formats have been done, because when you've had to use mana to do your setup, you don't get to do the mana and the accelerator both on the first turn. That's the search card and the accelerator. Like even in
Yeah, but I mean, all this is still just a story about why is Once Upon a Time efficient. The win rate, I don't know, man. Like when they make a Planeswalker better than Jace the Mind Sculptor, like I don't think that Once Upon a Time is as good as Preordain, and I don't think Jace the Mind Sculptor is as good as Oko, Thief of Crowns.
So, do you agree that Oko is a 10? Yeah?
No, I don't know. I don't know what scale. If Oko's a 10, then nothing else gets to be a 10. They made this weird, messed up card, Jace the Mind Sculptor, that was like the best any card should ever be, and then it was better than that. Oko's better than Jace the Mind Sculptor. It's stupid. I don't think Once Upon a Time is better than Preordain, and I don't think Jace the Mind Sculptor is as good as Oko.
I think that Oko is better than Jace. I think that Once Upon a Time is better than Preordain.
Okay, maybe.
And Preordain was banned in 2 formats. So I don't think they're going to ban Once Upon a Time in Standard. Whether it gets banned in a format like Modern or Pioneer, I don't think there's enough data to say yet. But we know more about Once Upon a Time in Modern than we know about Once Upon a Time in in Pioneer, just as a result of there not being that many Pioneer events yet. But like, it's a transformative card for some of these decks that are able to set up their game plans so quickly and win with like 2 and 3 card combos based on creatures so quickly. I would anticipate that Once Upon a Time is just absolute aces in Pioneer, right? It's showing up in decks as diverse as, creature combo decks and like elves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think Once Upon a Time has got to be basically the top of the list. Once Upon a Time and Dig Through Time.
You would imagine that Once Upon a Time gets banned in Pioneer before Oko does, right?
For sure.
So, maybe I don't understand. Maybe what we think of as like a card being good or, how you're going to run the scale. Maybe it's not that either of us is wrong, that we're talking about different things.
Yeah, I would guess so. Because I think that Once Upon a Time I am completely on the same page that Once Upon a Time is miles more likely to be banned. Not miles, but it's more likely to be banned than Oko in Pioneer by a good amount.
It's just like, I think Oko is like an iPhone. It's like an iPhone is an awesome piece of equipment, right? It's like the third most important invention that humans ever had. But the problem is that like,
what a derailing, faulty for like. Okay,
like an iPhone is only interesting because we have enough energy to power an iPhone, right? If we didn't have the battery technology that we have, over the course of the last 10 years, if we had batteries from like 30 years ago, it doesn't matter how good your iPhone is. You wouldn't do anything. You can't.
There's no way an iPhone is the third most important invention of human history. But whatever.
I don't know. Some smart people think that it is.
Sure. You think the iPhone is that big of a jump over the BlackBerry or whatever, any other smartphone, or is this a proxy for all smartphones?
A proxy for all smartphones.
And what's the difference between a smartphone and a computer?
Two things. A computer in the abstract is not in your pocket, and a computer.
Wait, no, why?
Hold on.
Just make it small enough.
And then a computer at the abstract is not by definition connected. I think that what I call an iPhone implies connectivity to the sum total of human knowledge and the ability to connect with other people. When a computer doesn't have that.
See, to me, it sounds like I don't know. To me, maybe we're just mincing words, but it seems pretty obvious that the internet is a more important invention than an iPhone.
Well, you're saying that an iPhone is just riding on the internet.
Yes.
So,
and I think that if you were to remove the iPhone part of the equation, the internet still pulls its weight.
It's very
If you were to remove the internet portion, I don't think the iPhone pulls its weight. I think it is but what do I know? I don't know. I just think the internet is kind of, that's what's really doing the work.
So I would say then, if you take Oko away from Once Upon a Time is still setting up pelt collectors, right? But if you take Once Upon a Time away from Oko, we don't know what Oko would do. It'd probably still be good, but
I don't know, man.
Don't know. There's no.
I think we have it. Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is. Ancient Stirring's busted when there's enough pieces.
Yeah.
But by itself, who cares, right? Like Ancient Stirring's amplifies problems and becomes a problem if there's enough other problems. But there are some cards that are good on their own. Jace the Mind Sculptor is good on its own. Oko is good on its own. Either way, man, the Pioneer format has so many other cards besides these Oath of Nissa and Felidar Guardian decks that are like even more poised to rise. Like the sheer volume of Smuggler's Copter decks
that haven't been built yet.
No, they have. Are you kidding? Well, maybe there's going to be more, but like 3 different Smuggler's Copter decks did really well in the Pioneer Challenge. So, for instance, did you see the Affinity deck? Dude.
I thought this was a pretty exciting strategy because I was just peeling back some of the standards, and obviously I look back at like Pro Tour Magic Origins, for example, when Yoel Larson won with Mono Red, and I'm like, hey, wasn't there a really exciting Ensoul Artifact blue-red deck? It seems like an awesome strategy. Like Darksteel Citadel and Ensoul Artifact is a heck of a combo. When you're playing with cards like Darksteel Citadel and Springleaf Drum, etc., Emery gets real cheap. I'm actually surprised there's only 2.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Like, why are there only 2?
I would play 4. I think that this is Emery is like busted. I mean, it's busted in this deck, right?
Like, they can't let Emery live.
This is like a 0 casting cost, personal Howling Mine every turn, right? Like
it doesn't cost 0. You're saying 0 to use?
Yeah,
I see.
Like it's super powerful. Like even if you're just getting the other thing is like you just got like a Bomat Courier or something like super cheap that you can put into the graveyard, or it just gives you potentially just a really cheap thing that you can Shrapnel Blast with.
Dude, if you get Ginger Brute Recursion going.
Poor Red Deck. Red Deck can't beat it. Actually, it's kind of silly, right? They should be able to just kill the Emery. But yeah, Ginger Brute Emery Maybe there's some decks that can't beat that.
Probably. So did you see MTG Max's blue-white deck? So it's got Thraben Inspector on 1, Smuggler's Copter and Walking Ballista on 2, Spell Queller, Reflector Mage, and Brazen Borrower and Teferi for a very thick and meaty 3 spot on the curve. Gideon, Ally of Zendikar at 4, and Archangel Avacyn at 5.
This is like the greatest hits deck, right?
Yeah. It's got a lot of 3-cost cards, though.
First of all, we were talking about how bad permission is in this format, but Teferi plus Spell Queller, if you get that going, that's like the lock. That's the closest thing you can get to the lock in this format anyway. I don't know. Like, is Gideon Ally of Zendikar good? It seems kind of chunky.
I think so.
In this deck.
I don't know. I think Gideon seems okay. I like Gideon. How do you crew the copter, man?
However you want.
I don't know. If you don't draw a Thraben Inspector, what's turn 3 look like?
You just crew with anything.
Like what? Like what? Reflector Mage obviously is like okay, I guess. But like Spell Queller, you're gonna crew with the Spell Queller? What about Brazen Borrower? You gonna crew with the Brazen Borrower?
You're saying everybody's too good to crew the Smuggler's Copter? Like they've got better things to do than to get into the copter? Yeah. Okay, first of all, Gideon.
And I don't want to play him on my main phase. Yeah, Gideon I like Gideon with it.
Very good copter crewer, right? I'm actually thinking that if I were going to be a Gideon...
Maybe Brazen Borrower is just more of a bounce spell.
What if you were like also Heart of Kiran? Like, Heart of Kiran seems great in this strategy.
Go on.
Like, why stop at 4?
You can use the copter to crew the heart.
You could do all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't know. It depends on what your board is.
Dude, you could play with White Nicodle. Toolcraft Exemplar.
You could. I mean, Gideon...
That guy crews a copter.
Gideon could be crewing multiple vehicles per turn. He could crew some with loyalty. He could crew some with dudes he's making. It would be a riot. I think that if you're going to play this deck, I think stopping its 4 Smuggler's Copter is thinking too small.
That's interesting. I mean, you got a lot of artifacts.
That said, I'm not like the hugest fan of this deck. It seems real choppy to me. Like,
it's got a lot of 3-cost cards, man.
I mean, and like,
okay,
it's bad against sweepers. Like, Teferi Time Raveler plus Spell Queller is the coolest, and like, you know, Teferi Time Raveler plus Reflector Mage is probably pretty frustrating for some people to play against. But at the end of the day, how many cards are you going to cast? This is the classic I cast 1 spell per turn deck.
Yeah. How about the black-green Delirium deck that uses 4 Smuggler's Copters? You got, like, Spider Space played a version of it that was, like, 4 Glintsleeve Siphoner, 4 Grim Flare, 4 Thoughtseize for Traverse the Ulvenwald, 4 Smuggler's Copter, and then you get funky. You got some Liliana the Last Hope action, Scavenging Ooze, but then you got the targets, man, the traverse targets, like 1 Corsair Prefix, 1 Emrakul the Promised End, 1 Ishkanograph Widow, 1 Murderous Rider, 1 Questing Beast, 1 Tireless Tracker, 1 Walking Ballista. What's this deck anything for? 1 Blast Zone, man. There's a traverse target.
Yeah, I don't know. This deck isn't I don't know. It seems fine. I'm not super excited by this deck. I think the toolbox isn't even that tool-tacular, right? Like, which of these cards other than Emrakul are you really like that excited to toolbox for?
Dude, it's on curve. First of all, I'm excited to go get Murderous Rider, no question.
Yeah, there's 1.
I just like Murderous Rider anyway. Yeah, but that's how many do you need to get the toolbox?
I don't know. What if you just played like a bunch of Murderous Riders instead of these other non-tools? And then you could just have like 7 Murderous Riders instead of 1 Murderous Rider, and then just not have some of these other tools that you never actually get.
What about Ishkana? There's no way you don't get Ishkana sometimes.
I don't know. I think maybe I would play it in my sideboard. Ishkana seems like a card I just don't want in my main deck in this.
Dude, like what if you really want to go get something good, but you don't want it to be as good as Emrakul? You're like, I could go get Emrakul the Promised End, but I kind of want to stretch this one out a little while.
I have
Then
like
you have Ishkana.
no interest in playing Ishkana in my main deck. I'm not sure I would want to play it in my sideboard, and I think I'd rather just play Emerge guys than Ishkana. Like, wouldn't you Emerge if you were just going to
That's
like
interesting.
like Emerge guys are way more powerful than Ishkana.
Here's a Smuggler's Copter deck for you, man. I mean, so Timrod's got a different kind of take on Smuggler's Copter. This is a red-green aggro deck of the Burning Tree Emissary variety, but instead of any kind of devotion action like the green deck uses it for, they're just trying to flood the board so that the Embercleave is cheaper. It's got Pellet Collector. They've got Pellet Collector and Experiment 1 to lead off, and then Burning Tree Emissary actually works perfectly with these red-green 2-drops like Zerta Goblin, Voltaic Brawler, and then on turn 3 you've got Bonecrusher Giant and Gruul Spellbreaker, with Goreclan Rampager as a additional trick, and Domri Anarch of Bolas as an alternate way to interact. The big thing here though is Embercleave, man.
I like Embercleave a lot in this deck. I almost just wish there was some token production here. Like, if you were going a little bit wide instead of just playing like individual creatures, it makes the Embercleave even cheaper. And, if you're getting the Embercleave on Goreclan Rampager, for example, that's pretty sweet, right? That guy's already got Trample and is huge.
Or if you're using the Goreclan Rampager's pump ability on whatever you put Embercleave on, so that you're getting a lot of mileage out of that +4/+2 bonus.
So, like, nothing against Gruul Spellbreaker, but if you look at like the Domri twins at 3, Gruul Spellbreaker at 3, Bonecrusher Giant at 3, and you can't cut Bonecrusher Giant because the deck does need some utility. What do you think about playing some kind of like Legion Warboss action, or what was the guy before Legion Warboss? Who's the same thing? Goblin Rabblemaster, just to get bodies for Ember.
Goblin Rabblemaster sounds pretty dope,
right? Like, if you're just like getting some bodies out there, like, I'm not talking about putting Embercleave on one of the goblins. I'm just talking about getting bodies out there to make the Embercleave cheap, so that like your Rampager or the guy you're pumping with your Rampager or somebody like that can carry the sword to the finish line. As it is, like, the Embercleave is only a 2 of Curiosity in this deck, and it could really be the shining sword to win a lot. I don't know. This deck seems like a little confused to me. Like, 3 Zerta Goblin, 3 Voltaic Brawler, but 4 Gruul Spellbreaker is just like, huh? There's no elves in this deck.
Yeah, so
I don't know. I think that's a weird curve. There's like a lot of 3s for a deck with no.
There's no elves. What about Pellet Collector, man?
Yeah, but he doesn't. I mean, don't get me wrong. Pellet Collector is a good 1-drop if you're going to follow him up with like Zerta Goblin and Voltaic Brawler and basically everything that's not a 1/1. But like, if you're going to play 3s, I think you want to get them. Like, otherwise, you're just playing fair, right? You're the only dude in the room who's playing fair for 3-drops. You're like, oh wow, I'm going to tap 3 mana for a pretty good creature. Does that sound like a recipe for success to you? Other people are killing you on the 3rd turn. Like, that Modern Devotion
killing
deck
you on the
a 15 volt, Voracious Hydra on the 3rd turn.
No, it's not. Not now. With Oath of Nissa and Leyline banned?
Yeah, it's only going to play like a 7/7 Voracious Hydra on the 3rd turn.
No, it's not. Get out of here, man. Dude.
I didn't say the 2nd turn.
Dude, okay, what about Smuggler's Copter? Discard Fiery Temper.
You probably have to have something else to discard stuff with, because otherwise I think Fire Temper's kind of miserable.
The mono red deck from the challenge in the top 4 played 4 Smuggler's Copters.
It did.
Its burn, it didn't have Fiery Temper, but it did have 4 Lightning Strike, 4 Wild Slash, 4 Wizard's Lightning, with 4 Light Up the Stage for a little extra, velocity.
Yeah.
With a lot of 1-drops in order to help power the Smuggler's Copter. Bomat Courier, Gitu Lava Runner, Soulscar Mage, Monastery Swift Spear. I like the Swift Spear. Eidolon of the Great Revel is the only 2 besides the Copter.
Yeah, you know what I don't like about this deck? Because I do like the structure of this deck a lot. I do not like the 4 Raminap Ruins. Seems
like you might just want... I don't know. What's wrong with Ramanop Ruins, man?
I think 0 is the right number. That's
You
my
just
guess.
don't think you're ever going to get up to 5?
This is a 19 land deck. I think that the number of times that you're stuck on one Raminap Ruins is, and you have to keep your hand because like you're like, all right, if I draw a second land, I could just dump my whole hand by the third turn, is going to be greater than the number of times you ever actually activate Raminap Ruins.
So do you want a second Castle Embereth? Because Castle seems pretty good in here.
I would play like 2 castles and like 18 mountains or something like before. I don't think Raminap Ruins is just ever going to get activated. It's just such a downside to me.
Would you main deck Searing Blood?
I think I like what Grinder is doing here. Like, all of their spells are super cheap, and Searing... Well, look, it's a different format. When Grindera was playing this deck, they had to deal with 4 toughness creatures, and I think that, like, you know, the fact that Felidar Guardian is banned is going to change the toughness on, you know, what creatures you're going to have to kill in game 1. As it is, it doesn't kill a Smuggler's Copter, right? It also depends on what you're doing. Like, if you're playing 1-for-1 against a Llanowar Elf, even a Wild Slash is unexciting, right? You're just like 1 card for 1 card, 1 mana for 1 mana. If you put 2 mana Searing Blood into a Llanowar Elf, like, you're not actually gaining that much unless you're getting them on the battlefield, right, at the same time. So it is kind of weird for me to say that I don't want to kill a Llanowar Elf with a Searing Blood. But you know,
yeah, it's pretty weird.
Sometimes you're like, oh, I get 3, but like, and they're like, oh, cool, I time walked you, and it seems horrible to me. Sometimes it's great if you've already got like, you know, 1 or 2 guys down, especially if they've got prowess or one of them's a Bomat Courier. Then, you know, every time you do that, it's going to be fantastic. But if you don't, and you're actually just taking your whole turn to kill their 1-drop, like you deal 3. All right, big deal. Like, that's not probably going to win the game. Also, it doesn't kill Nissa creatures. Like, I think like a big problem in the format is going to be just that they got a fast Nissa and they now have 3/3s, right? I think you got to think about that part.
Mm.
I think Hazard is a bad card in the main deck. Also, it's too cheap.
I think so too. I think it's a little slow.
Like, I think that
it's a bad Raminap Ruins.
I don't even know if I want that card in the mirror match. I mean, probably I do, but, you know, I might not be able to cast it. So,
what do you think of Field of the Dead in this format?
Awesome.
Now, do you like something like Smitherman, K. Smitherman 78? They had a list that was 30 land. So, like, right off, let's just start with that, right? 30 land. And then 4 Hour of Promise, 4 Growth Spiral, 3 Hour of Revelation, 4 Arboreal Grazer, and 4 Elvish Rejuvenator for more speed. So the deck has almost nothing in it. It just has the only things you do above Hour of Promise, like Hour of Revelation can sweep the board, obviously, but like you just have 4 Sphinx's Revelations, 1 Dig Through Time, 1 Spring to Mind, and 1 Approach of the Second Sun. Well, so that you can ever win the game.
An exciting way to win the game. I think that it's pretty cool that this deck has 30 lands, but the only thing that there's not a 1 of is 2 forests, 2 plains, and 4 fields. Everything else is a 1 of. You can win the game with like Lumbering Falls. That's another way you can win. But you know, you got Supreme Verdict, etc. You know, Hour of Revelation to defend yourself.
7 Sweepers is weird to me.
I mean, this is a very specifically built deck, right?
Definitely.
It's weird, like, it doesn't have, like, any Teferis, for example. Right?
It doesn't have almost anything. It's just Brain Geysers and land.
I think, like, if you get the right matchups, this deck is unbeatable. If you get average matchups, this deck is going to have a below-average win rate. That's my guess. It's such a one-note deck.
Yeah. To be sure.
Like, can you imagine somebody just casted Ashiok on turn 2 against you? What do you do?
Probably just play a 0/3 and then play an extra land. I don't know.
Yeah, like so they have their Ashiok. They never use it, right? They're like, hey, I have an Ashiok, and he has a lot of loyalty. Can you attack it? Nope. All right, I'm going to take it down to 1 loyalty. Can you attack it yet? Nope. It's
See, that's why you need the Rejuvenator.
You're right about that. The Rejuvenator
Yeah.
rumble in. Some of the Field of the Dead decks have, gone crazy stuff with, Golos. That land that can make 5 colors is pretty cool. You can Golos for it, so that you can, kind of activate Golos in decks that don't naturally have the mana base for Golos. But the other card that I think is pretty cool is Uvenwald Hydra, which is kind of like the green bigger Golos. And that can also get Field of the Dead.
Why doesn't anybody play the Hydra Crassus? Is it just because there's... Why would you ever play a counterspell?
So, I talked to Todd, actually, after he finished second in the PTQ, and he said, obviously this is different because, with Felidar Guardian Band, the world's going to change, but it was really important to be able to interact with the opponent. And so if you're going to have a creature that's like, a green X spell creature, Voracious Hydra was better because if you could just like kill their elves, right, their Gilded Goose or whatever, you prevent them from being able to go off against you in one turn. Because they can't line up things over the course of multiple turns, or you'll either bite their thing with Vivian, or you'll kill their Planeswalker with Nissa and other attackers. So they need to be able to play it all in one turn. If all you're doing is getting an advantage yourself, that's cool, except for they're going to kill you, right? So it was wholly to prevent the opponent from...
Yeah, but I just mean not in a Green Devotion as much as in like a Field of the Dead deck.
Oh, I don't know. Isn't it just so much more elegant to play one Approach of the Second Sun and 7 Sweepers?
Could be. Here's a list, man. Teferi Time Raveler, Jace Architect of Thought, Narset Parter of Veils, Teferi Hero Dominaria, and Elspeth Sun's Champion. That's a great looking squad, right? Like that's like some, not this year's Golden State Warriors as much as like last year. Like you gotta get a team out there of 5 brawlers, and let's just assume none of them are injured. Then you've got like a really good squad here with, I like the use of Thought Erasure, by the way, as a complement to Thoughtseize. I think Thought Erasure is just a fantastic card in this format. And this is a list, Fluffy Wolf wasn't even playing Dig Through Time or Treasure Cruise. I think Thought Erasure is just so good with Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise. Obviously forcing it through in the first place and being an attrition card, but also it's a card that goes to your graveyard, and the Surveil lets you put another card in your graveyard, and it lets you know if the coast is clear. It lets you know what you need to go get with your Dig Through Time.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all those things. I do think that as Golden State Warriors-ish as this deck can be, it has like no permission in the main deck, right? So
Thoughtseize and Thought Erasure.
So, if somebody's just there on the Hour of Revelation plan, some kind of planar cleansing maniac, you can get your huge advantage with all these planeswalkers, and then they can all go to the graveyard at the same time. I think that's the downside risk of this deck. What has Fluffy Wolf got for sideboard stuff? I guess there's Disdainful Stroke to stop that from a setup standpoint. I guess you could Unmoored Ego them.
You got Iguodala. I mean, Gideon, ally of Zendikar.
I think that
Man of the Year coming off the bench.
Jace Architect of Thought is probably not necessary anymore. I think that guy's primary job in life was to give opponent creatures -1/-0, and if they're not getting,
I don't know, man,
a million 1/4 creatures attacking you, he's less important.
Dude, I just want to draw cards with Jace, man. Although honestly, I kind of don't.
If you want to draw cards,
friendship with Jace ended. Oko is my new best friend.
I'm just saying there's better ways to draw cards with the Planeswalker than this guy, right? This guy, he runs out of ability, right?
Really fast.
Yeah, like one shot, and he's like in the hospital.
Imagine playing 3 Jace Architects of Thoughts and 3 Teferi Time Ravelers. Right, like, you could have played the 4th Teferi Time Raveler, but no, you got Jace Architect of Thought number 3.
Yeah, but if you need to stop people, like the thing is, he puts his ability on delay or whatever. He uses it, and then like next turn, if they're going to kill you, you still don't die. Like that card is really, really good. I think if all you're doing is keeping yourself from dying to Felidar Guardian, if it resolves, you're like in really good position. I think that's his main job, right?
That's fair. That's pretty good. Or was until the
Yeah,
ban.
and now he's turn him into an Anthony Davis contract or something, right? Like,
Yeah.
Thanks for your sixth man of the year. We got a new team to build.
What did you think of the other Field of the Dead deck? Like over in the PTQ, the top 8 list, Raging Tilt Monster. So it's got a lot of the same shell with Our Promise and Arboreal Razor and Elvish Rejuvenator and a bazillion land. But 4 Walking Ballista, 4 Ugin the Spirit Dragon. So instead of Brain Geysers, it's got like this Eldrazi vibe to it.
So Golos here is setting up with Cascading Cataracts, right? Which is a card that lets this deck, which otherwise is mostly green lands, activate Golos. Obviously, this is Pilgrimage is an interesting card here. There's only 6 forests. Its likelihood of actually hitting Spell Mastery is pretty low. There's only a total of 8 instants and sorceries in the entire deck. So I think you're pretty much just in it for the 1/1 forest. That said, I really like the structure of this deck. It's obviously very different than the Mono Green Devotion deck in terms of what you're going to do with your green ramp. It's weird to say this. It's not that ambitious for a deck with 8s and Emeralds, right? Like you can totally imagine just
and 10s.
Yeah, you could just imagine getting the stuff that you want online with normal draws. Like this deck is just totally not contingent on having a hyper explosive draw.
Oh yeah, and then with 4 Castle Garenbrig and 3 Shrine of the Forsaken God, the deck looks like it's already resigned to playing a backup plan.
Yeah, but its fair is still fair, but you're at the end of their doing their fair thing, you're like, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's a pretty good fair turn, and you're like, I'm impressed. Yeah. Nice job, Raging Tilt Monster. Yeah, that's what I think about this deck. I think it's just totally got good stuff going on. I think it's probably a sustainable deck. It has some clever combos. I think that Golos plus the Cascading Cataracts in particular, I'm a big fan of it. And then it's gonna win with Hashep Oasis some of the time. That's just the thing it's gonna do.
There's a different style of ramp that kind of downplays the Field of the Dead aspect. This red-green deck that Calm 1/4/1 played, that instead of Hour of Promise plays Explosive Vegetation. The idea being that instead of just Field of the Deading them into next Tuesday or Golosing or anything like that, this is a deck that just uses Ulvenwald Hydra as an even bigger Golos and powers out World Breakers and Dragonlord of Tarkas.
So I think that, the difference between this deck and Raging Tilt Monster's deck is largely just Pioneer is a young format and we haven't, knocked all the edges off of these archetypes yet. If you look at the last 6 red decks that have posted finishes in the various Pioneer challenges or the 5-0 lists or the PTQs, none of the red decks look the same. Some of them have Crash Through. Some of them have only mountains, right? This deck has Ulvenwald Hydra instead of Golos. I personally, I get Nissa's Pilgrimage. Explosive Vegetation at 4 and Ulvenwald Hydra. I don't buy not playing Hour of Promise. I think that card is too powerful. But I don't know. I love Ulvenwald Hydra in this deck, though. It seems really good to me. Maybe you can play them all.
So, man, what's your deck of the weekend besides decks that are banned out by the Oath of Nissa, Leyline of Abundance, and Felidar Guardian bans?
I'm really curious to see how the mono green deck shakes out without Leyline of Abundance and Oath of Nissa. But that mono black deck, which is also a Nykthos deck with Urborg, I think that could be potentially an exciting deck. But I don't think that the version that we've seen so far is the tuned version yet.
Yeah, we didn't see any Sultai lists this weekend, or we didn't cover any today. But man, I sure do want to try to do some work with Jace Vryn's Prodigy, Murderous Rider, and Oko, and maybe Treasure Cruiser Dig with Thoughtseize and some good stuff. Thought Erasure.
Are you gonna have like a one Emrakul to win or something? I think that the limiting factor on that kind of a deck is like everybody else is going for the throat. Even if you look at these fair decks, like these, mid-range green ramp decks or something, they've still got like an Emrakul or an Ulamog, or a big thing that they can punish you with. And I think like just getting an advantage, you're just going to get bowled over by their Eldrazi or their big spell.
Well, I think you got to win with something big, because if you got no permission, you can't really hold on to the game.
Yeah,
you got to just do something with your advantage.
You have like 3 planeswalkers in play, and they're all getting you like, between them like 2 extra cards a turn or something. But that all gets washed away depending on how big the opponent's big spell is. So you gotta have something.
Mm-hmm. All right, awesome, dude. Well, I gotta head to Richmond. I'll talk to you next week, dude.
Be cheering for you. Bye, Patrick.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge for jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber